Spider-Man 2. Aptly named because it's the third one in the series. Or maybe it's because there are 2 Spider-Men this time around. Who cares? The name doesn't matter much beyond whatever clickbait title I used. Perhaps it's called that because this game has improved upon the formula and given players 2 defensive options instead of just 1. In addition to dodging, which returns from the previous games, our beloved arachnid people can also parry this time around, which is the only way to defend from heavy attacks. Unfortunately for me, Peter and Miles have decided that they want to meet every fist, blade, and bullet that crosses their path. So can you beat Marvel's Spider-Man 2 without dodging or parrying? But of course that question creates a bunch of other questions that are stickier than a spider web, so I guess I'd better take a minute to sort out the rules. I can't just ban the circle and L1 buttons entirely because they happen to be useful for things besides dodging and parrying. L1 especially, I needed to use abilities and throw objects. If I ever actually perform a parry, I'll have to restart from checkpoint faster than you can say does whatever a spider can. Not too hard, honestly, saying that phrase takes a little while. There's also a weird block move that can happen whenever you mistime a parry, and while it's not technically against my rules, I also reloaded whenever that happened. In order to avoid hitting circle during combat, I remapped my controls to switch it with the left D-pad button, which I know I'll never hit accidentally because why would I? I normally don't even have a reason to hit it on purpose. Circle isn't used exclusively for dodging though, I need it for certain gadgets and abilities, not to mention menu navigation. Using Venom Smash might get a bit harder, but that's worth avoiding a filthy, disgusting dodge. If I ever do dodge by accident, which happened occasionally when I mistimed a shoulder button press, I must immediately restart from the last checkpoint. Good? Good. I'll explore any murky situations as they arise, and oh yeah, I kinda have to play on the hardest difficulty or everyone in the comments would say mean things about me, and that would hurt my feelings. Though obviously you should say mean things in the comments if you hate this video, in addition to, leaving a dislike. On the other hand, if you're a beautiful, classy, intelligent person who happens to enjoy the video, as I'm sure all beautiful, classy, and intelligent people would, feel free to express that opinion by clicking the thumbs up button and maybe even subscribing for more. Hold on everybody, look at the screen! A flashback for relevant narrative context. And Norman Osborn is wearing green? No idea why that could be. Wait, does he have a symbiote? Who cares? We're in the present day now and both human men are making absolute fools of themselves.
My name's Pete, Mr. Parker.
Pete, did you not rehearse this at all?
Bathroom? I need your help.
Are you sure this isn't something you can handle yourself?
I'm sure.
Hey Miles, ever heard of a phone call? You're never gonna live this down. High schoolers are brutal, man. Well, their social lives aren't off to a great start, but maybe saving the city from Sandman will go a bit better for our arthropod-themed heroes. The game swings into action with a movement tutorial, but there's nothing to be worried about on the way to the boss arena. Oh. I have a really bad habit of speaking too soon, but I promise I'll go to rehab for that eventually. Gameplay's barely begun, and I've already reached my first roadblock. Everything completely freezes and refuses to let me continue until I've pressed the dreaded circle button, and the on-screen text prompt purges any potential ambiguity for the purpose of this procedure. Not great, but I wasn't about to give up literally 1 minute into the challenge, so I reloaded and tried again with the exact same result. The bus is telepathic and always knows exactly where to fly to put Spider-Man in a sticky situation, even if it means casually phasing through a building or two. At this point, I was getting a little worried. When starting the challenge, I was primarily concerned about 3 things: tutorials, boss fights, and QuickTime events. And now I'm already getting curb stomped by the first tutorial. But I did notice that the game forced me down this predetermined street, so I thought that if I could go around, maybe I could avoid the bus. I ran up the side of the damage control building, which seems rather antithetical to the spirit of this challenge, and then the devs told me a bit further on that I was being a stupid idiot by not playing the game I bought the way that they wanted. Fine, I guess I'll do it your way, and hey, that worked! Miles asks Peter if he's okay despite encountering no danger, and I was free to continue toward the boss arena without breaking my face on public transportation. Unfortunately, the bus was quickly replaced by a large chunk of building with the exact same time-stopping trouble, but my secret pause menu weapon reset my position and allowed me to finally begin the boss battle. But that didn't start so well because it turns out that Sandman's superpower isn't actually being made out of sand, it's telekinesis. Every single object he throws homes in on Spider-Man faster than you're about to join my Discord server. link in the description. His sandarm swipes are even worse because they're completely impossible to avoid while in range. The game doesn't think so, but it's not fooling anyone with that contextual button prompt. I will do what I want, thank you very much. And what I want is apparently dying repeatedly, because that's exactly what happened. Believe it or not, that's a common theme throughout this video, although I'm sure a genius like yourself could have guessed already. Eventually, the sands aligned, and I got enough throwable opportunities to heal from the constant battering and progress the fight.
You should try yoga!
Marco responds to my lighthearted exercise suggestion by chasing me through a parkour section and forcing me to fight a few of his sand minions. Without being able to dodge, I took a bit of a beating, but this combat tutorial lacked challenge even on the hardest difficulty setting. With webs, barrages, and throwables, I delivered a solid sand smackdown before getting literally smacked down to the ground and swallowed alive. Now I can finally start dealing some real damage with electric punches and slap Sandman around a bit after blinding him with webs. Miles gets blasted halfway across Manhattan to demonstrate the true power of the PS5's SSD, because you gotta show that money on screen, and I did pay $70 for this game, but he's back in the action before long and getting chased up the side of a building. I can't dodge here, but I made it up the building with exactly 1 health point to spare and began another combat section. This one's pretty easy too, providing the Venom punch ability for easy glass making, but soon gives me the finisher tutorial, which represents the first required circle use of the run. Not an issue though, because I'm not using it to dodge. Finishers are pretty worthless for this run, mainly because the buttons I need to press are on opposite sides of the controller, but they do come in handy occasionally. Not normally in standard combat sections like this though. It's time to make Sandman drink his medicine, which turns out to be New York's water supply. But that just makes him angrier, and after Spider-Man gets blown away by a dust devil, it's time to break out the web wings. You know, the untested prototypes? Yeah, they work perfectly. Man, must be nice living in Fantasyland. I can't even record a voiceover on my first... Dang it, I can't even record a voiceover on my first try. On the glide back, I got beamed by a tanker truck and whacked by a whirlwind, but we're finally almost done with the tutorial. Miles charges up Peter, and together they slice Sandman in half with a laser beam. Whew, mission 1 is complete and the challenge remains intact. After this, I was feeling pretty good, but as you can see, there's still a lot of video left, so it's definitely not that simple. Grab a snack and relax, because it's gonna be a bumpy ride. Sandman was just the appetizer, and now we're introduced to this game's big baddie, Kraven the Hunter. He brutally murders this guy and then complains that he hasn't found an equal. Well, dude, if you weren't juicing yourself on magic testosterone, as we find out later, maybe that would be a little easier. No matter though, his lackey has a PowerPoint presentation all about the superpowered people in New York to show in the middle of the jungle. Okay, because apparently Kraven has been living under a rock. Actually, he might have literally been doing that. I wouldn't put it past him. After performing a few dumb chores like saving people's lives from aggressively clingy sand, it's time to fix our broken web network. Where did all that plastic come from? His suit is skin tight. Oh, never mind. A quick introduction to the skill tree precedes the first actually difficult combat, because it turns out hardened criminals with assault rifles don't fall apart as easily as sand. On the hardest difficulty, I can take fewer hits from these goons than they can from me, so just a few punches will lay me out flatter than Mary Jane. Avoiding bullets is absolutely necessary, and without circle, X became my default button to instinctively spam whenever I found myself in the slightest hint of danger. Oh, what's that? You want me to call it the cross button? No. It's pretty useful as a dodge replacement because it allows me to jump off the ground, off enemies, and web zip in the air. Crucial for getting away from the many things that want to kill me. Web strike is also pretty helpful because it lets me travel halfway across the arena to avoid impending injury. Using these tactics, I was able to bring justice to the bad guys, and by justice, I mean multiple broken bones and a giant hospital bill that will almost certainly drive them deeper into a life of crime. Merca! Although now is probably the best time to discuss the biggest caveat in my rules. See, it turns out that jumping off enemies with X is sometimes considered a dodge by the game. I found this out when stopping a crime later in the game where perfect dodging was a bonus objective, and this was counted. So I was put in a pesky predicament. Do I restart the challenge and lose all my progress, or do I continue on as normal? How would I even change the rules to account for this? After thinking it over, I decided to continue as advertised. Hey, don't blame me, the X button is not referred to as a dodge anywhere in the controls, and I promise there's still plenty of suffering to come. But if knowing what Spider-Man 2 looks like without jumping, or dodging, or parrying would truly complete your life, let me know in the comments and I'll consider making a sequel. It's time for Miles to continue the Spider-Man crime-stopping spree, and it's here where the game actually tries to teach me how to perfect dodge, giving me a little tutorial pop-up and going so far as to freeze the game. But that didn't happen after restarting from a checkpoint, so the real problem is the parrying tutorial which directly follows. Chunky Charlie here charges out of the truck, throwing a brass-knuckled punch that is definitely going to miss, and then the game freezes completely, demanding that I parry the attack. However, all is not lost, because for a brief moment before time stops, I have full control. This can lead to some wacky situations. When web zipping away, the game straight up cheats and lets the brute run after me while I'm stuck in place. Attempting to use my upshot gadget won't stop him because it's not upgraded yet. Going sideways can avoid the enemies entirely, but even though the parry prompt never appears, the game is soft locked. I tried swinging away, but my web was cut by an invisible force. It was only when I web zipped straight toward the group that I finally found an answer. Miles grabs the edge and automatically climbs on top, so naturally the enemy attempts to break his fist on the truck, as any sane person would. The game still freezes, so I did press L1 to fix that, but there is clearly no parry animation here, so I think my run is still safe. Let me know if you disagree, but I think this is about as close as possible to beating this section without parrying. It's not like I've completely banned the L1 button or anything. After coming face to face with my greatest enemy, American journalism,
Someone get a photo with us! Mass criminals kidnap beloved newsman!
I ran around the city to do some side content. I mostly won't touch on this throughout the video unless it's especially important or interesting, but I often took a break from the main story path to get some upgrades. They're pretty much required if I want any chance on the hardest difficulty. But now it's time to take a break from Spider-Manning around. You know, do some normal human stuff like getting fired.
You're fired.
Falling behind on rent, pretending to clean up the house,
Oh man, I've been wanting to play this.
or listening to your girlfriend complain.
I sold 14 copies. Nobody wanted to read about Symkaria.
Really? Nobody wanted to read about the country that held the entire city hostage last game? Something tells me you're coping, MJ. This mission is just flashbacks and cutscenes, along with some light breaking and entering, so there's nothing to worry about here challenge-wise. Harry seems like a cool dude. I'm sure nothing will go horrifically wrong with the treatment of his vague disease that leads to the entire city getting enslaved by an alien mind virus. That would never happen. Much scarier than that hypothetical scenario is the next mission, where supervillain prisoners are being transferred from the raft. Why? So they can escape and the story can happen. I can't think of any other possible justification. But it wouldn't be a Spider-Man story unless he has a personal connection to one of the villains, so Mr. Negative is here too. Miles is a little shocked, but he'll be fine. Of course, the hunters just have to crash in and ruin the party, and by that I mean that I'm treated to another parry tutorial. Come on, the first one wasn't enough? Now it's about undodgeable heavy attacks, and I'm frozen as soon as the intro cutscene ends. Restarting from checkpoint doesn't help at all either, because unlike with Miles, I don't have that brief moment of control. Although things looked dire, I wasn't ready to give up just yet. Peter won't respond to my inputs, but the camera will. Can that actually help me in any meaningful way, though? The answer to that is sort of. By quickly positioning the camera away from the attacking hunter and putting it in this extremely uncomfortable location, it's possible to glitch the game and freeze the enemy in place, which prevents the parry prompt from appearing. But it's not all good news. Spider-Man is still frozen, and the other enemies aren't. That means I can get my face kicked and punched and sliced without being able to retaliate. I may have avoided parrying, but that just results in a brutal death moments later. No matter what I tried, it ended in one of two ways: death or prompt freeze. Funnily enough, I wasn't even able to parry in this frozen state. If you have any ideas, please let me know, but for now I think I need to bite the bullet and accept challenge failure by parrying the heavy attack. I did manage to break this section, so I consider that a moral victory at least. Now it's a minimalist challenge, and hopefully we don't run into anything else like this for the rest of the game. Might as well release my rage on this bunch of punching bags. I tried returning to this mission later, but the game doesn't have that option. There must have been strategies I didn't try, like turning down the difficulty. If a lower difficulty means avoiding a parry for this section, I'd say that's worth it. I KO'd the hunters in a few rounds of combat and introduced the Talondrone enemy type to my Spider Fists of Fury, but things are only getting worse. The boat is grappled by some armored trucks that the police should definitely not have allowed into the city. Miles takes an acid trip before unleashing his inner Sith lightning powers, and the boat capsizes completely. The Spider Boys save all the nearby civilians, but at what cost? Mr. Negative is captured, and the hunters are at large. You know who isn't at large, though? The police! They didn't show up this whole time! What are my tax dollars for, exactly? The challenge took a back seat for a little while as I completed some missions without much combat. Miles reunites with his uncle, giving me access to prowler stashes, which usually have some nice resources. Then he helps out his school by rescuing a kidnapped teacher and rescuing a kidnapped mascot costume, which seems slightly less important, but you do you, man. Peter takes a tour of the Emily May Foundation where he proves himself as an expert computer scientist.
I could take a look at juicing the neural network speed.
Geneticist.
Could you look at one more gene for me?
And holographic bee protector. I'm sure that releasing thousands of drones to hunt wildlife will not have any unforeseen negative environmental impacts. It's only when I got back on the trail of those annoying hunting nerds that problems started appearing again. Just like those invisible camouflage bases, sometimes it's impossible to see what's wrong until it's right in front of you. And S.H.I.E.L.D. enemies are very, very, very wrong. Fighting them is definitely difficult. You're meant to dodge under their legs to attack from behind. Using abilities or exploiting openings with webs is still a viable way to take them down though. No, the real problem is, once again, their tutorial. Very similar to last time, the game freezes and I'm locked into a particular course of action. This time around, things are just a bit different, and I dared to hope that I'd be able to dodge this dodge. Before actually making me dodge, the game first wants me to web strike the enemy with triangle, but I'm still locked in right after that. No, the thing I was really optimistic about was how I could still break the game with my camera trick, and this time the enemies didn't attack. But no matter what I tried, I still couldn't move, so instead of dying, the game was just soft locked. Yay! I still couldn't progress, and there wasn't anything that seemed like it would work. It is with a heavy heart that I perform the first dodge of this dodgeless and parryless run, so now there's one of each on the board. I broke these sections, and that still wasn't enough. The game literally had to cheat and prevent me from moving in order to force these actions. It clearly fears my power, but that can only remove part of failure's sting. Well, I must soldier on. There are many battles to win and enemies to get smacked by. After defeating the rest of the S.H.I.E.L.D. hunters here, without dodging, I might add, I followed a little birdie all the way back to its nest. Then it's the usual blah blah. Give up the element of surprise like a complete idiot, beat some baddies, hack future tech, and find a critical location marked in red. You'd be surprised how many times that exact sequence of events happens in this game. Invading the base isn't too hard, especially with the new stealth options this game provides. Because this challenge makes combat a lot harder, the incredibly easy stealth is a nice change of pace. Web lines and wall takedowns galore. Besides, I had 2 focus bars at this point, so when I did screw up, my health was less of an issue. Here we find Craven's research lab, which is where he ensures that any enemy he faces becomes much less of a challenge due to his insane amounts of preparation. Doesn't that kinda ruin the point? Yeah, it does. He's immune to Scorpion's poison now. What the... never mind. At least we're introduced to these cute and cuddly creatures. I've always wanted a robot dog. They're less squishy than human enemies and explode when they die, but their lack of ranged attacks makes them function almost normally in this challenge. While Miles flees his mom's date to go save Black Cat, can't really blame him, Rio sneaks a peek at his purposefully closed laptop. Sure, he was only looking at the news, but you're playing a dangerous game, woman. It's worth noting that combat at this point is becoming significantly tougher, and it's not at all unlikely that I'll fail random crimes or have to retry a base multiple times. But progress is progress, and you can't stop these lean, mean, spidering machines. Well, I mean, you can temporarily. I have infinite retries, though. The only thing that really takes a hit when I die is my sanity, and let's be honest, none of you care about that. This mission has a bit of everything. Stealth, magic, magical stealthy women, and of course, France. But one thing it doesn't have is an actual roadblock for this challenge, so let's portal onwards. After trying out Mysterio's brand new Dance Dance Revolution Simulator, and breaking Mysterio's brand new Dance Dance Revolution Simulator, it's time to have a little fun at Coney Island. Aw, how heartwarming. Wait, did she just turn down the prize? What are you doing, MJ? More importantly, what is Grave Rock doing here? Yeah, I know his name is Tombstone, but apparently he's reformed now, so I figured a less scary name was in order. Then it's time to ride the coaster, and there's this girl who's alone?
I'm really nervous.
What, did she peer pressure herself into riding? A very romantic Ferris wheel ride is interrupted by failure.
Jonah posted the new guy story. It already has 5,000 views.
Wow, wish I got that many views in 30 seconds. More pressingly, the hunters are attacking Grave Rock, and now they have crossbows. Maybe they did before, I wasn't really paying attention, but this is where it starts to become an issue. In this spread out arena, they can snipe me from far away, and those things hurt. It's important to always be attacking an enemy so I can jump off of them when I find myself in danger. Net launchers are introduced, but they don't even deal damage, so compared to all the other enemies, they pose essentially zero threat. If you recall, QuickTime events are one of the things I'm really worried about, and the end of this mission is a giant QTE sequence about saving civilians from a collapsing roller coaster. It turns out there's a very simple solution when the game wants you to press circle, though. Just don't. Things will turn out fine. Lucky none of these arrows hit a coaster passenger though. Speaking of, why is this girl still on the coaster? Why was she in the first place? Harry jumps in to save the day though, and after mostly failing to control his powers for an entire night, he concludes that he's ready to assist Peter on a dangerous mission. Saving the roller coaster prevented me from saving Grave Rock, so now it's time to rescue him from a steel foundry. I don't know how these things work in real life, but this sequence has ensured that I will never go within 10 miles of one. All the hunters inside probably died a horrific death, but that's alright, because they respawn infinitely just like I do. While these shenanigans are going down, Miles infiltrates the art museum with his spider bot, but it can't dodge or parry, so who cares? While taking on the criminals, I unlock the Mega Venom Blast ability, which is very powerful, but I usually forget about it because I barely ever have access. The only problematic portion of this mission comes when chasing down the fleeing trucks. I can't dodge any bullets the criminals shoot from the back, and when I did web onto the truck, I'm funked up by this funky drum to get repeatedly shot while hanging off the back.
Funky drummer.
Luckily, the game took pity when I was one hit away from death, allowing me to press triangle and stop the truck. But hey, don't you think we've been having a little too much fun? Who would want to play as Spider-Man when you could play as Human Woman? MJ's on a mission to infiltrate a hunter base and rescue Dr. Connors, and she has an instant takedown stun gun now. At least that's better than last time, although it does raise the question of why the spiders don't use this incredibly convenient non-lethal weapon. Maybe they just enjoy the feeling of mashing faces inside out. Me too, guys, me too. I mean, I have no desire to participate in violent acts. That was a joke. Please don't arrest me. Whew, I think I'm safe. Things are going well as MJ begins her stealth mission. Take down a few hunters who clearly never learned how to use any of their 5 senses, run up a very stable wooden board. Well, okay, guess it wasn't that stable, but you'd need 2 tranks to take down a tank like Mary Jane, so that's nothing to worry about. Oh, come on! What is this jank? Completely frozen again, led into by an unskippable cutscene. The restart option was mysteriously absent from the pause menu, which forced me to abandon the mission and begin all over again. Unlike the superheroes, MJ has basically no movement abilities, and because the game is intent on forcing me into this cutscene, normal human options are locked off from me. I can't even climb up a ledge or over a box. Getting the hunter's attention on the other side of the fence did absolutely nothing. I can't crawl under instead of using the wooden plank. I can't even do a stupid little tiny human jump. I tried looking on Google for glitches, but couldn't find anything. Without any other idea, I decided to grit my teeth and perform the second dodge of the game. Pressing the left D-pad button has never been so painful. Even the first time I had the moral superiority of having broken the tutorial, but here I've got nothing. Hopefully this is the last time. MJ certainly doesn't need to dodge anywhere else. Very conveniently, Harry calls Dr. Connor's cell phone right as MJ reaches it, allowing her to tell them the location so the Spider Pals can come save the day. Kraven injects him with everyone's favorite comic book material, mysterious glowing green goo. Whoa, I didn't know Mark Zuckerberg was in this game. Unfortunately, Zuck's surprise appearance gives Kraven the opportunity to fatally wound Peter. That actually makes a whole lot more sense in the context of this challenge. We're going back to the real Spider-Man 2 as he embraces his inner Miles Morales and becomes black. For the first fight with the symbiote, I'm completely invincible, so I wouldn't have a reason to dodge or parry even if I could. But Pete can't figure out how to give the suit back to Harry, so it's time to track down Facebook's CEO. But for the lizard to actually be useful, he needs to be cured, and only Kraven has the antidote. The hunters have crashed my parties a few too many times, so I decided it was my turn to crash theirs instead. After disguising himself as a waiter, Peter reads Kraven's secret browser history and then gets absolutely wrecked. Repeatedly. There are so many enemies here, and I can't defeat them all with a single charge of Symbiote Surge. At this point in the challenge, combat is getting seriously difficult, and I need to be extremely careful with all of my resources. Webs are absolutely vital, and are especially overpowered in Symbiote Surge where they act as one-hit KOs. Being able to put a few enemies in timeout will never not be useful when I can't dodge and am surrounded by guns that desperately want to separate my head from the rest of my body. Before stealing the antidote at the church, I need to demolish some more of his goons, most notably the new shield brute enemy. The game really wants me to parry here. Oh boy, it keeps asking. I guess that's the main way to open him up for counterattacks, but abilities work fine too, and eventually I built up enough focus to finisher him off. Hey, it finally came in handy. You'll start seeing more of those actually. This isn't the last time. After getting assaulted by Kraven and discovering that goo suit no like loud bell noise, I headed back to the EMF in order to run some experiments. Ever wanted to crawl around inside a particle accelerator? No? Well, too bad, you have to. You don't have to dodge though. I don't care what the game says. This is the slowest electricity I've ever seen, and I'm not about to use a horrifying, revolting circle press to avoid it.
You hungry? I could go get a pizza.
Pizza time.
Pizza time is rudely interrupted by a bunch of goons crashing through the ceiling. Hey guys, ever heard of subtlety? I'm no expert on this stuff, but I think it's supposed to be pretty important on a hunt. This large arena actually works to my advantage, so it's only when I encounter Winnie the Pooh Axe Murderer Edition that things get a little spicy.
I'm fresh out of honey.
He can't be webbed to walls and has way more health than a normal enemy, but he is vulnerable to all of my abilities and gadgets, so my strategy basically went like stun, punch, 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 repeat. I beat him first try, although the helicopter that crashed through the roof right afterwards proved more challenging. By that, I mean I died once. Between my gadgets, abilities, and symbiote surge, I made quick work of them. The antidote's ready, but despite a building literally getting blown up, the cops are nowhere to be found. Just Oscorp choppers. New York sure is lucky to have the Spider-Man, because it would be completely screwed otherwise. Tracking the escaped reptile is complicated somewhat by the many hunters doing the exact same thing. After getting my skull bashed in by counterattacking brutes and clearing out a warehouse, Drone Genki joins Miles in a stealth horror section where I'm completely unable to jump or crawl on the ceiling. When it comes to building tension, that's what I call cheating, but the lizard is nowhere to be found and only his skin has been left behind. That is, until he crashes through a wall and a watery three-way chase begins. Taking out the jet skis with a few quick-time events poses no problems, but I can't dodge the sniper shots from the boat and helicopters. Not sure how much it matters since I don't even have a health bar in this section. Pete gets shot, and Miles loses all momentum in order to save him, becoming hunted by the lizard. Instead of just swinging up to the bridge though, he decides it's a better idea to get pulled along by Genki Bird. But the game doesn't care if I fail another QTE. After they destroy the helicopter, Pete leaves to defeat the lizard all on his own.
It's got big teeth.
So do I.
Pete, I know you're wearing an alien, but I'm pretty sure your teeth are still normal human size. Slow sewer crawl, secret lab, spider sense screws up spectacularly, and finally we've reached the lizard boss fight. Been looking forward to this one, definitely should be interesting. Why? Why did I pay money for this game? Another tutorial, and this is as unambiguously a fail as it can possibly get. This time, I can't even control the camera. I can restart from checkpoint, but that just makes this glorified cutscene play over and over and over. There's no chance for me to break the game because there's absolutely nothing I can do. Fine game, you can have a third dodge, but that's it. No more left D-pad presses for you. The fight might not have started well, but phase 1 was a breeze. I repeatedly chained gadgets and symbiote abilities to drain his health bar like I drain 8 cups of water per day because I'm healthy and stay hydrated. The surge upgrade that replenishes all my abilities definitely came in handy at the end. After this, Zuckerberg wises up and starts crawling around on the walls, but the fight is still quite manageable. I used resources to create openings and jumped away from his attacks when he recovered. Knowing when to retreat is tactically necessary, as my only death in this section was caused by overzealous assault. Normally these would be parried, but this challenge forces me to give up prime damage opportunities in favor of safely prolonging the fight. Between the second and third phases, Lizard takes a fun little field trip through downtown Manhattan. Aside from another failed QTE and getting repeatedly smashed by a flaming truck, this section is normal.
Now the police are involved!
Oh, my bad, the police are here? Never mind, that's about as abnormal as it gets. After this string of quick successes, I was feeling confident heading into phase 3, but spoiler alert, I was wrong to feel confident heading into phase 3. Lizard has more health than ever, along with a powerful new scream attack. Plus, he'll jump onto the wall and hurl chunks of concrete, which home in on me just like Sandman's. This phase alone took me 40 minutes of attempts along with plenty of deaths, including this one where the reptile was quite seriously 2 hits away from being beaten. Unfortunately, so was I. Look at that, you can barely see his health bar. If I ever ran out of abilities or gadgets to stunlock him with, I had to rely on the steam grates around the arena. They're not ideal because they take a couple seconds to trigger and are prone to missing the lizard's spastic movements, which really sucks because they can only be activated once. Eventually, I had a lucky run where I was only hit by the lowest damage attacks. Only a quarter of my health, that's nothing! With drastically increased survivability and some well-timed symbiote abilities to interrupt unparryable and undodgeable attacks, I was finally able to win the battle and hear the best line of dialogue in the entire game.
Time for your medicine.
I can only imagine how much harder this fight would be without the ability to jump or web zip away. But if you don't want me to have to imagine that pain and frustration, well, comment section's right there. Oh, and guess what? that was nothing close to what's ahead. For the sake of my sanity, I decided I needed some upgrades, so I took my frustration out on some virtual opponents by completing Mysteriums for hero tokens. Don't get me wrong, I died here plenty of times too, but adding health and another 3 damage improvements was totally worth it. In this challenge, some Mysteriums become straight up impossible though. I can't perform finishers because I need my focus to heal from all the attacks I couldn't dodge, and finishing without getting hit? Might as well call Mr. Sandman because that's only happening in my dreams. Lizard Wrangling has petered out, but sadly he can't sleep because he's a total insomniac. When the hunters attack, Pete goes full sicko mode, so it's up to MJ and her sticky stun gun to stop him. I tried to get through this part quickly, which led to me screwing up and dying a few times, but once I slowed down and took my time, any twinging thoughts of using a dodge were erased completely. Now it's Miles' turn to go after the symbiote, and Mary Jane has the brilliant idea of being trapped, alone, with a deadly alien creature, which ends about as well as it possibly could have. Miles learns the primary moral lesson of this game: do not trust construction workers or save their lives. They will stab you in the back with more glowing green goo? Wow, that stuff really does everything. Maybe it can cure cancer too. Of course, Miles isn't going to stay trapped here for long. After parkouring through this lovely laser maze that some random hunter probably spent way too long engineering, he turns on the air conditioning and beats up some guys who must have volunteered to have their bones turned into a fine powder. As if these arenas weren't easy enough, invisibility completely removes any challenge because I can just run away and take them down with stealth once they forget I'm here. Unfortunately, I can't use Mega Venom Blast in this room full of chanting morons, but if I could, that would be really funny. Now comes the actually difficult part of the mission, a battle to the death with Mr. Negative.
There's no escape.
I tried.
You know you're not Spider-Man, right? Just because you can't escape doesn't mean he can't either. This doesn't occur to Miles though, so the boss fight begins. Here's another section where I'd be completely screwed without my ability to press the X button. Aside from the little tutorial pop-up, Martin Li's attacks are extremely aggressive, so strafing with web zips is the only consistent way to avoid them. Still, phase 1 is easy enough with reptile strats. That is, spamming gadgets and abilities to stun lock and deal damage. It's only on the second stage where things get really bad, due to a wide variety of reasons. For starters, my abilities are stripped away as Negative encases himself in an invincible force field, and I'm told to dodge in order to recharge them. Good news is, avoiding them is enough. It just takes longer and is very dangerous. Plus, he recovers more quickly when stunned and gains some very tricky attacks. But would you believe me if I told you that's not the worst part? That would be how phases 2 and 3 are combined, which forces me to take down twice his health in a single attempt. And at the beginning of his final health bar, the negative bubble reappears. Luckily, abilities aren't actually required. A well-placed Mega Blast will work too. What you're watching is my successful attempt, and you might notice something strange. His health isn't going down. This glitch, at least I assume it's a glitch, had me really worried, but to make up for it, I cheesed almost the entire phase by knocking him against the wall, so I'd say we're even. He made one last desperate attempt to shield up, but I just hid in camo while I waited for my abilities to recharge. The fight ends with a trip into the deepest parts of Miles' psyche, but this is basically just character development, so you know, basically worthless. Miles kicks Lee out of the arena and gets recaptured, although I really think they should both have been able to escape, but the plot's got a plot, I guess. And now the plot's calling for a double helping of boss bashing, as the next mission requires defeating both Kraven and the symbiote Spider-Man. Kraven drops a cage on Peter, which he completely busts out of instead of just lifting it up for some reason. I guess they just wanted this cool line.
I'm assured that material is unbreakable, but I believe anything can be broken.
The primary problem in Kraven's fight is just how short of a time he remains stunned and vulnerable. I can only get a few hits in before either getting smacked or jumping away. My 3 focus bars definitely have their work cut out. Surging halfway through the fight gave me the chance to drain his health and recharge my abilities, which were able to get me tantalizingly close to success. With just a sliver of health to go, I tossed him a battle axe to split his face open and move on. In phase 2, he 6 robot dogs on me and turns invisible, but there was nothing so demoralizing as trying to use a finisher and getting one of his pets instead. Also, there's a bell that can cause some serious struggles when not webbed up. I came dangerously close to death many times, but I had unlocked an upgrade that let me heal when shooting webs, and that was extremely useful. With no health to spare, Surge was finally fully charged, allowing me to finish this phase for good. Before Pete can actually kill Kraven though, Miles charges in and stops him. Hey, I know you guys don't kill and stuff, but maybe you should have let this one slide. Kraven has caused untold destruction and literally wants to die in battle. Whatever, what's done is done. Pete's pretty mad, so he covers the entire arena in his goo. At this point, you guys know the drill. First phase is easy, second phase is a little bit harder, and the third phase had me really wishing I could ring the bell repeatedly. That would make this a lot easier. It takes perfect use of every power in Miles' arsenal: invisibility, webs, gadgets, venom blasts, and abilities, but eventually he gets it done. Bonds at the subcellular level? Ha, no it doesn't. Pete tears it off with his bare hands, and Miles captures it with a handy Oscorp container. I don't even want to know where he was hiding that the whole time. Pete needs to get this symbiote back to the lab ASAP, and of course make absolutely sure that it does not escape under any circumstances, given that this is literally the most dangerous creature in existence. And whoops, never mind, Harry hits it with his cane and Spider-Man does not make the slightest effort to avoid it, and now has been unleashed. Somehow it's way stronger than it was when Pete had the suit on, despite now being bonded to a sickly, frail weakling instead of an actual superhuman. The rest of the plot kinda hinges on that point, which really annoys me. Honestly, this whole cutscene really annoys me. But now I finally get to play as... Okay, I'll stop doing that now, I promise. This is the most crucial mission in the game, not only for the plot, but also for this challenge run. Mess up some Oscorp security guards, break through some doors, and okay. This might look like another cut and dry failure, but it's not actually so simple. It's also worth mentioning that I forgot to record this entire section my first time around, so I had to abandon the mission and restart for more footage. Strangely, this section actually worked differently in both attempts. The first time around, when I pressed L1 after waiting a long time, nothing happened and I took damage from these bullets. What definitely didn't happen was a Rage Slam, which is the ability mapped to circle, but that changed when I retried. Now, every time I let the game freeze completely, I get this AoE attack. There's no parry or dodge happening here. For context, this is what parrying as Venom normally looks like. I may have pressed L1, but just like with Miles at the beginning, there was no parry animation, so I see no reason to count this. The scoreboard remains safely at 1. I think I deserve a bit of luck after everything else the game has forced me into. If you believe I should count this, I ask that you have a civil discussion in the comments with anyone who disagrees. Actually, no, if you get legitimately angry over what happens in a silly video game challenge, that'll be way funnier. Please do that instead. I, however, am allowed to get legitimately angry because I've just reached the hardest part of this entire challenge. The Venom vs. Kraven boss fight is the first time I was actually worried about having to dodge outside of a forced scenario. In the 2.5 hours I spent throwing myself at this section, I became intimately familiar with every stupid, horribly unfair aspect. But if this battle is that dumb, well, I'll just need to think of an even dumber strategy to beat it. Things actually start off just fine, allowing me to get a few attack combos for about 1/6 of his health. However, once the fight reaches this point, Kraven unlocks the ability to teleport and spam homing missiles. Let me tell ya, that's a deadly combination. Whenever I attack, he'll reappear moments later on a random balcony and fire 3 sets of 5 missiles at me. These are barely possible to avoid by air dashing at the right time, but it's not easy, and I have absolutely no idea what I'll do if I make the sequel. To make matters worse, I don't know where he is until the shot warning graphic appears, and by then, it might be too late. But at this point, you might be thinking, he's come across difficult attacks before, how bad could this really be? Oh, don't you worry, it gets even better. Or rather, more painful for me. For you, those are the same thing. At this point, Kraven becomes completely invulnerable to my normal attacks. Any assault will be met with an instant parry teleport missile combo, and I haven't even mentioned yet, they can go through walls. I can't even attempt to deal damage without facing one of the most obnoxious moves in the game. So what's the solution? Well, should be obvious. It's the same thing I do whenever a problem confronts me in life. Run away like a coward.
Your hands shall be round my throat before this night is done.
Though it's a bit uncomfortable with Kraven constantly reminding me of my crazy ex-girlfriend.
Look at you, magnificent. I have you, Heather. Do not disappoint me. How fast are you?
As I run in circles, depleting my already low reserves of sanity with each new step, my 2 abilities slowly but surely recharge. Kraven is unable to block these, but they take a long time to refresh, and my only other method of dealing damage is throwing grenades, which hurts him just a sliver and is a rare opportunity. The best part of abilities is that they also won't trigger his homing missile attack. The one downside is that pressing L1 to activate them can cause an accidental parry, which killed multiple promising runs. Getting killed also killed some promising runs. Imagine that! Eventually, after running in circles for over 10 minutes straight, I wore down the health bar enough to reach phase 2. Luckily, for the first time, a late phase is significantly easier than an early one, and it only took a few tries to finish the fight and bite Kraven's head off. With Venom bent on enslaving the world into a giant symbiotic hive mind, it's up to the Super Spider Bros to stop him. That's gonna be hard though, because the symbiote has unlocked yet another ability that it didn't have while bonded with Pete. I probably shouldn't ask how symbiote reproduction works, but I'm going to anyway. How does symbiote reproduction work? I demand an answer, Insomniac. Or someone. I am way too scared to Google it. These new enemies are tough and have some very wonky hitboxes, but don't come anywhere close to breaking the challenge. The most interesting thing that happened during this introduction segment was discovering a brand new glitch. I got killed for 2 frames, then revived when my web shot granted me a single health point, allowing me to continue fighting momentarily. The game still restarted like normal, but it does make me curious about what would happen if I reached the end of a section in those few seconds. Miles records some sounds in order to beat the symbiotes with his pocket Bluetooth speaker, although being a music tech student, I would have thought he'd know that you can generate any frequency digitally, but I suppose messing around in Audacity is what I do after I'm done playing a challenge. I assume there are differences between all these colored symbiotes, but all I really figured out is that the green ones are annoying and hard to hit. The easiest way to defeat the enemies is by swing kicking them into water for an instant KO, so that's mostly how I dealt with them at the harbor. The final part of the mission involves defending some extremely durable Bluetooth speakers from attacking symbiotes while they take an entirely arbitrary amount of time to sync up. On second thought, this is Bluetooth we're talking about, so 2 minutes is actually pretty accurate. By doing this, the Spider-Men save Rio and Genki from certain doom, along with a train full of random civilians that nobody cares about. Of course, Venom knows that the proper way to build tension is to put a main character in danger, so he heads over to Aunt May's house and picks up Mary Jane. Spider-Man tries to help, but an inconvenient camera cut puts him off screen, so there's nothing he can do until it's too late. Previously, MJ was crazy in the suicidal sense, but now Scream is crazy in the homicidal sense. I beat phase 1 on my first try by remaining aggressive and just triggering car alarms whenever I ran low on gadgets. However, I died almost immediately after, and the game thought this was an excellent time to crash. Come on, it couldn't have failed at some pivotal moment to create some juicy drama that I could milk for this video? Sad. Do better, Insomniac. As is, I didn't lose any progress, and the game just restarted me at the beginning of the second phase. Phase 2 is also pretty easy, but the third moves the fight to a construction site, so now instead of destroying people's current homes, we're destroying their future homes. As we all know, punching improves every romantic relationship. The projectiles that Scream throws are very difficult to avoid, and to impair my movement further, it's easy to get temporarily trapped in the construction. Like all bosses, she hits hard, with every mistake I make costing me about a third of my mostly upgraded health bar, but that's pretty normal stuff. The most annoying part of this fight is the arena, because it's possible to knock Scream out to a place where I can't hit her. This happened many times, and while she'll always jump back in to continue, it breaks my combo and gives her time to recover. Stupid invisible walls! Webs are the MVP of this battle because they perform 3 extraordinarily useful functions. Most obviously, they can disable Scream for a short time to let me get some hits in, but they also fill my health and focus bars, which are pretty important for keeping me an alive person. So basically all the time I wasn't attacking, actively avoiding an attack, or just out of webs, I'd be spamming them almost as much as I spammed the X button. The final phase introduces MJ's hair grab crush attack, which annihilates over half my health. The game intends these to be dodge only, so if I'm in its completely unfair range, there's nothing I can do. My only options are to interrupt it with webs, gadgets, or abilities, or just get lucky and be far enough away to avoid it. Dealing enough damage before succumbing to the sweet release of death is obviously a difficult task, but what might have made the difference on my successful attempt was my chance to save up 2 focus bars and use a finisher. This extremely weak looking kick. Ugh, this is supposed to be a power fantasy, but I could have done a kick harder than that. Still, it knocked off an 1/8 of her health bar, and that might have been just enough to help me close things out. MJ takes the very intelligent and mature action of quitting the job she just got a promotion for.
This is editor material. Watson, where are you with my apple fritters? I'm starving, and
Jonah, I quit.
I take it apple fritters are some weird new metaphor for a news story? Because they literally talked half an hour ago, and JJJ said,
write more juicy stuff by tomorrow morning.
it's not even tomorrow morning yet.
What the?
These new symbiote NPCs are everywhere now, but actually trying to stop their random crimes usually ends poorly, so I headed straight for the next missions, which, are basically just stopping random symbiote crimes. Besides, I was mostly upgraded at this point and was close to credits, so the rewards weren't really worth it. City Hall is being invaded, but with Miles' backup, I easily cleared the first wave before getting re-assimilated. Don't worry, Mr. Negative is here to help. His powers can directly counteract the symbiotes. How extremely convenient. The psychonautical combat sections don't pose a threat, because even though there are plenty of enemies here, they're weaker than average. As Martin Lee kinda maybe sorta not really sacrifices himself with a half-hearted anime scream, Miles unlocks a new ability and beats up a bunch of shadow demons, and Peter wakes up from his beauty nap with a much more culturally sensitive symbiote suit. Now it's a whole lot better at destroying black things. Wait.
We are healthy, strong. This is what you wanted.
Well, he's not wrong, those are some pearly whites. After stealing the magic space rock, Venom leaves and it's time to save the city. Wow, apparently these symbiotes can phase straight through solid matter. This one killed me with a whole bus in the way. The hardest part of this mission is clearing out a whole symbiote nest as solo Miles. Let me tell ya, it feels fantastic to have to restart this 2.5-minute sequence with exactly 6 seconds left on the clock. But most of my retries weren't from deaths, they were from accidental blocks and parries. This arena is so small that any timing errors when trying to use abilities will result in an unintended action. Most of the time that's no problem, but for a challenge run, not ideal. Eventually I had a smooth run and Miles gets his 4th dream sequence of the game. 5th? I'm starting to lose count. Peter clears out a subway tunnel and then clears in a subway tunnel. Trapping symbiote brutes in the stairway with overpowered web shots is pretty fun, but an invisible wall prevents me from following, so I just spam throwables and more webs. Miles catches Venom being naughty with Pete.
Yo, bro!
Not cool.
So they escape and regroup. I decided it was time for some final upgrades before the final showdown, so I cleaned up a few symbiote nests for 1 more damage increase. MJ's mission to steal the asteroid is pretty easy to do without dodging, and the only somewhat difficult part is taking down the behemoth at the end with sonic barrels. It's fast and has lots of health, so I ran away and kept obstacles between us until I got a good opening. Venom raises the entire school that they met Peter at for that nice bit of extra emotional relevance, and I'd begun the last stretch of the game. 1 more boss battle to defeat without dodging or parrying. 4 health bars, 4 phases, and a whole lot more than 4 dirty tricks. First and foremost, webs don't work. No real explanation as to why, they just don't. Even though that's what saved MJ's life in the tunnel. Cool. One of my primary damage opportunities might be gone, but I still spammed webs like there was no tomorrow because they healed me and filled my focus bar. Those extra bits of health seriously made all the difference and are absolutely crucial for this fight. The hardest boss in the game. Well, except for Harry versus Kraven, but this still took me 2 hours and induced severe suffering. Some of the strategies I've discussed previously are effective against Venom, but they're also a very unique boss overall with a bunch of quirks I need to account for, like when he covers an entire platform with a massive black tentacles. I only died twice in phase 1, but had a close call where I sat at 3 health for a while because I had no webs or focus. But phase 1 is definitely the easy part. In phase 2, Venom gains new attacks, summons enemies, and can even equip a special healing item that gives me a whole nother health bar to chew through. Gadget, attack, ability, attack, run away like a little baby, and repeat. Add in the occasional mix-up of making a loud noise for an opening or beating up a goon instead of the big baddie, and you have yourself the Peter section of the Venom boss fight. Oh, and deaths. A whole lot of deaths. And this glitch where our attacks collided somehow, but I was still unable to move? Weird. I may have given Venom a vicious beatdown, but that's just not enough because our protagonist has Hero's Darkest Hour syndrome. Venom cheats evolution and defies Darwin by materializing a giant pair of bat wings and flying to the EMF before his fancy rock can be destroyed in the particle accelerator. Why a hand grenade or lava or something doesn't work is beyond me, but now it's up to Miles to protect MJ from Venom, and the difficulty takes a brief dip for phase 3. One particularly lucky thing is that his Grab Crush attack is still possible to avoid by instantly web zipping away, so that's nice. I would have been totally screwed without it. While most of this fight is the gadget ability combo you've come to know and love, Miles does add an interesting new layer, invisibility. This causes a lovely glitch where I can reach the range that Venom's AI completely shuts down, causing him to stand like an idiot doing absolutely nothing. Sometimes. It's kinda hit or miss whether camouflage actually makes Venom lose track of you. Swinging around and using gadgets and abilities when I had the opportunity allowed me to avoid most attacks, which let me save my focus for a finisher toward the end of the phase, but even these last few seconds were a hard-fought battle where I came extremely close to death. MJ delays the space rock destruction in order to futilely yell Miles' name after him after he somehow gets buried under rubble. It doesn't show how that happened. The last we saw was him breaking away from Venom, but our heroes need to become drooling idiots now in order to justify the last 2 gameplay segments. Giant black goo monster man grabs the magic space rock, but Spider-Man kicks him away just in time, which makes Venom drop it even though his hand was fully closed. Very convenient for building dramatic tension. Unfortunately, I was insta-killed immediately after this cutscene because I had no health left over from the previous phase, but that was remedied when I respawned. Last phase, just one more section to beat without dodging or parrying, and the challenge will officially be over. But it doesn't disappoint. This is the second hardest boss phase in the entire game, only behind Kraven and his stupid phasing homing missiles. Well, it's a good thing Venom doesn't also have homing missiles. I really need rehab. In my defense, he only pulls out this attack after reaching half health, because that's when he regains his winged form. Even with my best attempts to avoid damage, his extremely brutal and aggressive combat style means death is perhaps always mere seconds away. Clearly, I needed a strategy to deal with these missiles, but that's actually harder than before. Well-timed strafing air dashes allowed me to dodge Kraven's, but those had a single point of impact, and this is a swarm. It's possible to avoid through normal means, but very inconsistent. The best option is to use Thunderburst and essentially teleport past the missiles, but that requires the ability to be charged. I racked up death after death here, along with a few unfortunate restarts. There was the one accidental dodge where I looked at both my empty ability and gadget mapped to circle and decided to try to do one of them. I forget which, but let the record show that I was very dumb here. The more common cause of restarts was getting damaged right at the beginning, as the optimal strategy is to immediately throw a sonic barrel, which sometimes takes long enough to get hit first. When this happened, I found it best to reload because there's no sense in starting the phase with a health deficiency. Nearly an hour of attempts for this phase alone, but all it took was 3 minutes of flawless execution. When the crucial moment of missile firing appeared, I lucked out by being right next to Venom midair, making the first wave whiz right past. The second wave spawned nearly right on top of me and chopped a third off my health bar, and I tanked another hit shortly after, but not healing had allowed me to build up my focus for a finisher. That alone wasn't quite enough, so I followed it up with Thunder and Mega Venom Blast to end things once and for all. The cutscene that follows is barely another QTE with 4 inputs across even more minutes, but the crucial factor is that I'm just punching Venom, not dodging any of his attacks. So now the game is over. Harry is in a coma undergoing treatment.
Get the G serum ready.
Peter is restarting their charity organization without any of the resources that made it viable in the first place, and MJ is starting a podcast. Hate to break it to you, MJ, but you're not going to get very far if Podcaster 3000 isn't even working correctly. It restarts recording every few seconds and definitely hasn't saved the last half hour of audio, even if it says it's uploading a 67-minute long file. If I were you, I'd request a refund because this is clearly faulty software. In conclusion, good gameplay, solid characters, plot is held together by silly string and dusty cobwebs. 6 out of 10. And if you're wondering where those 4 missing points went, well, if you've made it this far, it should be pretty obvious. 3 dodges and 1 parry. Miserable moments to be sure, but aside from that, I still completed every single battle and boss fight without them. It's been a difficult journey, but not quite as hard as putting this massive video together. A project like this takes weeks of effort to complete, so I want to sincerely thank you for watching to the end. Clearly you enjoy observing me suffer, and hey, that sequel's always on the table. You have the power to make me regret ever mentioning it. Have a wonderful day, or night, or evening, or morning, or whenever you're watching this, and I hope to see you next time.